You're listening to Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. On each episode, we sit down with key industry experts to discover more about what's happening in the world of learning and development, from current trends and insights to the most valuable lessons learned along the way. Join us for a fresh perspective on all things training and the best direction forward.
Welcome to Learning Leader Spotlight, where we interview the learning leaders of today to help the learning leaders of tomorrow. I'm your guest host, Kimber Hanrahan, and I'm a relationship manager with Training Pros, the sponsor of this podcast. Training Pros is a learning and development contract staffing company. We like to say, when you have more projects than people, let us find the best consultant to start your project with confidence. I would like to introduce you to an amazing thought leader and a woman I've had the absolute pleasure of knowing and partnering with for over 4 years, Kimber Hanrahan from GoDaddy. Kimber is the global head of learning and development. Kimber, I am just so glad that you're joining us today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited. We have such great conversations, but putting it formally in a webinar or a podcast, I'm not sure, Kimber, but we'll give it a go.
We'll risk it, right? It'll be great. Well, so Kimber, I know you pretty well, but if you would just share a little bit about yourself with our audience, kind of 60-second overview of who you are and what you do.
Oh, yeah. I always like to tell people I develop people. And so my job is I lead learning and development at GoDaddy. It's a global company, but what it really boils down to is ensuring that people learn, right? And so I've been doing this, I hate to say it, for over 30 years. But I started in operations. And so I've been working since I was 10 years old because my dad owned his own company. And so I've worked in construction, I've worked in banking, I've worked in travel, mainly because I wanted to take my kids to Disneyland and I knew travel agents got great rates. But all of that led me to learning and development. And I feel so blessed to be in a role that lets me help others be better at their jobs every day, and also maybe influence a little bit of change in the corporate learning environment, which I think is still really needed and can be valued differently. And like running it like a business is a new concept that a lot of leaders haven't grasped onto yet. And so I've always done that, which I thank my dad for that and that entrepreneurial background.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's interesting that you say that. I'd love to hear a little bit more of your perspective on looking at it from more of a business background. So if you'd like to share anything else as it relates to that topic, that would be great before we continue on.
Yeah, I think I learned early on when I was first learning into learning, if you will, like my leaders at the time really wanted us to measure things like how many people took the class, what was your completion rate. And I was really interested in but did it change the business? How do you measure the behavior change? Can you measure the behavior change? And so I started actually, believe it or not, talking to my dad because he ran a business my whole life. And I was like, Dad, how would you accomplish this? Which is so fascinating to me. But that's why I'm always talking about universal skill sets, because they really do translate. And so he started talking to me about what can you measure that will have an impact? And can you tie it to the revenue of the business? And so at a very early stage in my career, I started working with sales teams to really tie the learning to their proficiencies. And then ultimately, are we moving the needle on your revenue goals? And when I started doing that, I started getting invited to meetings to help them plan for training versus an afterthought. Like traditionally, especially early in my career, it was like, oh yeah, we probably need training on this. And then it translated to, hey, has anybody invited Kimber yet? And that really worked well. It actually helped me in my career, to get new promotions and build into things. But what was always really fascinating to me is how can we show the outcome? Because sometimes in learning you can't, sometimes it's an output, right? And that's a big thing right now in the world because of OKRs, but you have to be comfortable in both. But really what it all boils down to is how do we enable the business to do their best work? And that comes from, I think, growing up in a family that had their own business, but also just trying to understand the operation. And before I was in learning, I was in operations. And so I understood the business. And now I needed to figure out how to run learning like a business. And so hopefully that makes sense to you. But that's how I tried to tie it together, because we were just missing the mark. We were doing training on their busiest days and wondering why nobody came to class. That turned into a career of, let's look at it differently.
Yeah, no, I think that's invaluable, lessons and thoughts for the new leaders in our space, right? Who are up and coming and like needing to find a way to bring value, but also to your point about having a seat at the table, but also being invited to that seat and not as a afterthought, right? As a, oh, let's let training now, right? Let's let learning and development now. You come first when you do that, when you can provide value to the business.
Well, and at the time too, it like took so long to build training. Like some of my conversations would be, well, you need this in 2 weeks. You should have invited me 6 weeks ago. And so as we progress in the evolution of the industry, we've learned like we can't take as long as at a needs analysis anymore. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that in the podcast. But it really was like, give me time to build what you need so that you see the impact that you want. And then let's tie it together to really educating the difference between communication and education. But it was all a full circle, like, let us have the seat at the table. And then what I always coached my team to was, you have a seat at the table, go sit down. Stop waiting to be invited. Now that we've been invited, go sit down. And that's also a very different mindset that I had to help people with, is like, don't wait to be invited. Now you know what the needs are, go be proactive around that. And that was also a curve, but we're there now.
It takes time. All good change takes time, right? So thinking about evolution, you brought that up, impactful changes, right? So tell me, what have you seen in the last few years? What have been the most impactful changes in L&D from your perspective?
Oh gosh, that's such a great question, because I've worked in several different companies in the last few years, and each of them were at different stages of evolution in what I like to call the learning industry. And when I was in telecom, I worked at a company, and I'll say the name. I'll just say I had the Taj Mahal of learning teams. Like, we had state of the art everything. We had our own training facility. It was like going to a college campus. And then I've moved into other organizations where I had trainers that were training in backroom offices because there was no training space. And so I share that because I think every corporation, every business is at a different state in their learning journey. And that's important to understand, because where the industry is honestly light years ahead of all of us in regards to AI evolution, technology, just-in-time learning, TikTok videos. We call them micro learnings, but just for the everyday person, like, it's a video, and can I learn something in 30 seconds? Yes, you can. Uh, so digital books, audio books, like, everybody is like applying these, and the speed of attention, we used to teach people like, adults stop paying attention after 7 minutes. Well, that's changed too. Right. And so we have to evolve with that. And I think in some areas, the learning industry is really good about that. And we've been first adopters, kind of because we have to model what we expect. But in other areas, we're dragging our feet because there's this fear of job replacement, especially as it relates to AI and technology. And so uh, I think it's kind of it's not wishy-washy, but it's an all over the board answer to your question, because every corporation is different in their journey. But I think the most exciting thing about where the learning industry is now, if we can help our partners get their arms around it, is how to leverage the technology that's available today to work smarter, not harder. And that it doesn't mean job loss, it means job moderation. And that's a term I've been trying to use with my team lately. I haven't heard anyone else say it. I'm making it up as I go along, but that's what we do. We evolve, right? So your job today was different than it will tomorrow. It's kind of like the old leadership classes. What got you there today won't keep you there tomorrow. And so that's kind of the same way we have to look at the technology. And it's exciting. Like, it's super exciting. And I think experimentation is another thing that learning leaders have to get into. And that's not something we were ever willing to do before.
Yeah, no, I love that's true. Now, what was that term again? Because I think that's going to resonate with a lot of our audience.
The moderation piece.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So if you think about it, like, traditional facilitators, right? We facilitate a conversation, kind of like what you're doing with me. And so, but when you look at how the technology has advanced, it's not about facilitating that conversation anymore in the traditional ways. It's about moderating that conversation. And that can happen in a variety of ways. Most often, because of social media and the platforms, it's in a written format. And so how do you moderate or observe what's happening in that virtual world and respond in a way that is neutral and helps people learn. And so I think that, one of the things we're working on with my team is like helping them understand you have to moderate the content differently. And you have to really be intimate with it so that you become like an expert in that. And it's kind of like that jack of all trades. It's really coming to life. Because think about, I don't know how you became a trainer, but I became a trainer because I was good at everything, right? Like you're the jack of all trades, Kimber. Go teach somebody how to do this. And so really it's coming full circle. It becoming an expert in a little bit of everything so you can moderate the different channels. I don't know if you're on Slack or Teams or whatever, but I think in Slack, I have over 100 channels that people expect me to pay attention to, right? So that's what I mean by moderation. Hopefully that helps. It makes sense to me. I don't know if it does to anyone else, but it does to me.
No, it's a totally different perspective than one that I had heard. And it does make sense. I think that, to your point, when I came into the space, it was the jack of all trades. It was right, you dabble in this, you do a little bit of that, and you do whatever is needed to be done. And then I think we went a little bit into specialization, right? Where you've got the true instructional designers or strict developers, right? And then you've got people who are great at video or voiceover as an example. And so, and now we're going back to, you're right, like you need to be skilled in a lot of different areas and platforms. And I love the term and I love the approach. And I find it's a bit reassuring too, for those of us in our space to hear it kind of described that way.
Well, I hope so. I started talking about that because as I was encouraging my team to learn about AI and figure out how they could use it, it came up in a couple of different areas. So with our instructional designers, there was a fear of you're going to use AI to design everything. And the reality is like people that I report to think that, hey, does this help you? And can you use this to design? And it's a good starting point, but you can never take away that you still need that human eye on things because hallucinations in AI are real and you have to validate the content. And so I would say it's a great starting point, but it's never going to take away from it. It's only input. The input that goes in matters. And so I started talking to them about like, let's lose the fear and let's look at how our roles are evolving. And then one day I was talking to a trainer and same thing, like, well, you're going to just have this bot train everything. No, actually, I want you to moderate that conversation because you're going to have to add value or ask the question that maybe the bot doesn't know to ask because we haven't trained it on that yet. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, that's good. Like, and, you allow yourself one moment every year. That was mine because it really resonated with that trainer. And he was like, oh, I didn't think about it that way. And I'm like, well, start thinking about it differently. Let me help you reframe that because we have to grow. And honestly, I think that's the whole thing with learning and coming full circle to your first question is like, how do we evolve? I know because I've been doing this for 30 years. Learning teams are always I don't want to speak in absolutes, but have been some of the slowest teams to adopt to some of the changes in the industry, which is why we lose our seat at the table because we take too long to do things. We want to do a full needs analysis. Then we have to decide if it's going to work. And then we have to evaluate it before we implement it. We want to run a pilot and all these things, and it just elongates the time. And so the other term that I stole from sales. So have you ever heard RFA, revenue faster is good? Yeah. So it's a common sales term.
Okay.
What I started telling my team is LFIG. And they're like, what the heck is LFIG? And I'm like, learning faster is good. We can be faster and more nimble at things. And to do that, you have to be willing to experiment, which is why I love the tech industry, which is where I'm at now, because experimentation is key to success. How many times did we fail before we tried something new? You still have to be careful from a learning lens because you don't want to harm the business. And so our motto is do no harm to the business and where can we experiment safely? But by embracing that, it lets my team train things and experiment in the technology that whereas before, coming full circle to your original question around the moderation piece and where did I learn that from? It's like because they have to do things differently or that traditional model we looking for not only dies and goes away, but so do the roles. And I think the roles can evolve with the businesses.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm curious as to your perspective on learning faster is good. And how do you find the right skill set or the right, like, what are some skills that if you're a new or even an established learning professional, right? Like, what are some skills that would be important to have in order to embrace that approach of learning faster is good?
Yeah, that term has gotten me in so much trouble with my team. Can I just tell you? Like, Kimber, they don't think they can say no to everything. And I always teach them the art of maybe, right? So don't say yes to everything, but figure out where you can fit it in. And so learning faster is good is a balance. And so you talked a little bit around like the specialization skill sets, like you had your instructional designers and then you have your strategists or
Right.
and then you have your delivery teams and like even in the role that I'm in, like we still have those roles. I think you always need a level of experience and expertise in those roles in order to ensure that you're still meeting adults still learn the same way. Adult learning theory hasn't changed, right? That's the thing is like adult learning theory hasn't changed and we have to recognize that people learn differently. I think that's even more important now as we leverage technology because the perception is that with the AI and the technology, it shortens the time to learn, and maybe it does in some instances. I think it shortens the time to develop and try and fail and fix it because you have tools now that can help you fix it more quickly. Where the humans come in is where that expertise is needed, right? And so learning faster can be good in all of those areas if you have the right expertise to check and balance you. And so we're still figuring that out at my current company. But I think that's going to be critical. And the reason I'm so passionate about it is because I think I'd shared with you in a personal side of the house, my son has autism. And I always had him in the specialized classes and they always had to do these things. And he just took longer to do things. And so I would say difficult, not impossible. And then when he did his first debate at college, which by the way, they told me he would never go to college. Wrong. He did his debate was on learning and he always felt segregated and isolated and like it didn't help him. And I thought it was helping him. And so it was heartbreaking from a mom's perspective. But from a person who leads learning, it started me thinking on like, how do we approach learning differently? And are we taking too long to do certain things? And so that's when I started looking at learning faster is good because when I was taking so long to do things, I was missing half of the people who probably needed to come with me on the journey so that they could learn as they go along. And so there's all kinds of different ways to balance that because we have to flex where all of our learners are too. And my son taught me that. And I would have missed it had I not been brokenhearted and felt like such a failure as a mom, to be honest. But I learned from him every day, right? And he did that. I started looking at all the things and I'm like, okay, we're taking 6 weeks to do a needs analysis. How do we shore that up? Bring a trainer with us. Bring a business partner with us. And normally you do that in the long project anyway, but there are phases that they come in at it. And so what I started doing is bringing them all in at the beginning and like giving them pieces to work on. And then they would do these working sessions to bring it together. And it shortened our analysis on our design time by like 3 weeks. It was just iterating on it since then. So it's a really long story, but I hope it makes sense.
It does. No, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing. And I can guarantee you are a wonderful mother. So,
she says you did the best you could, Bob. And so for me and my personality, I'm like, thanks for the same, but it's all good. Like he's a great guy. He's wonderful. So thank you.
well, good. No, that's awesome. So if you think about, like, we'll change gears a little bit if that's okay. And just I'm thinking about as a new leader coming in and your expertise and your knowledge. How did you make sure that you were developing your own skills? Like, what's your favorite source for industry information or news and latest and greatest, right? Like what everybody else is doing. What can you share there?
It's so interesting. So I'm a self-learner. I'm a people observer and I learn a lot by listening and watching, which, that's great. But the degrees and certificates are what a lot of people in our industry care about. So I did go back to school. I do have my bachelor's. I also have a dual master's and my master's. That's when I went back to school as an adult to get my master's, I had figured out I am really good in this learning space. I'm really good at helping people find their true north, as I like to call it. So I knew to target my master's in human resources and leadership, which is great. But prior to that, you're kind of, and this is what I tell people who are always like, oh, I think I want to be a trainer. And so like, I always send them to a day in the life of the trainer, and 90% of them come back and say, I never want to do that again. You have to really have passion for that. So to be honest, Shanier, I've wanted to be a teacher of some way since I was like 2. Like I always was teaching people. And so I figured out how to translate that ultimately and to make money at it in corporate America, which is great. But I think always wanting to help and develop people inherently, I've always had that. But people who want to get into the field, do your homework, find out what really goes into the day in the life of the job. And then what do I do to stay into it? And how did I do that? I did go back to school, but like I just looked over here when you were asking me the question because I do read. I know not everybody learns by reading, but I love the Harvard Business Review. I love Training Magazine. I love the ATD website. I love all of that stuff. I have a subscription to the Wall Street Journal, and then you hear all these executives say, well, I read that every day. I don't. Like, I find articles that I like, and then I'll pin them and I'll read them when I have time. And I do mark time in my calendar every week to do some type of learning. I feel like I have to do that as a learning leader. I know not everybody has time to do that. And so what I would say is don't overlook the moments or the lessons that you can learn and start implementing some best practices. Believe it or not, I started by journaling. And the only thing I did every day was I had 2 questions I asked myself. What did I learn today? And did I check my ego at the door? And so after about a year of doing that, I went back and read it I don't know how other people are. I'm a nerd. I like to look back on my journals at the end of the year. And so I get ready for the next year. And I started seeing like these trends in like the different things I had tried because I was learning. And so then I started like, what books should I read? And then I started attending free webinars. So there are especially today with the technology, there's all kinds of things out there. And so what I really challenge people to do is read this book. So my favorite book is Leadership and Self-Deception. I can tell you about that if you want me to. And then I'm like, and go find 3 webinars on a different subject and find out what you like about it. And then come back and tell me if you still want to be in learning. And then I have them do a day in the life. So I really have them explore, because it's one thing to think you want to do it, and then it's another thing to actually apply it. And I think the last best way to share what I think about that when I share with people is like, why? Like, why? Why do you do that? And are you chasing? I have somebody that I work with and I know them for years. Her name is Mary. And she's like, are you running towards something or away from something? And if they could tell me why they're running towards it, then that's a key indicator of like, yeah, you should really go for this. And I really love that she taught me that, because some people just haven't found their why yet. And so tell me why. And then are you running towards something or away from it?
I love that. Yeah. And actually, it reminds me of my background too. I came from operations, right? And was asked, wait, why are you going into learning and development? Like, that's an interesting transition, right? And for me, it was about the ability to help the organization at a larger global, or not global, but scale, right? And so to help more than just the people that I was managing, specifically at my hotel. And frankly, from a little bit of a selfish perspective too, is around the variety that our space brings and the different areas that you get to learn about. I wasn't segmented in my roles, right? I had the ability to kind of learn from different parts of the business. And so I really enjoyed that. But ultimately, it was around just helping others thrive in their environment, is what drew me to this. So I was running to it, not away from.
I love that. Yeah, one thing that really drew me to it too is like I wanted to help. So I'll freely admit, I just said I've been doing this 30 years, and so I come up in a different time in our history, right? And so I had to scrap for everything I got, every promotion, every job. I worked in male dominated industries, and I'm not knocking into that because I learned so much. But I did have to fight for it. And I really wanted to help women like myself find what they were passionate about and do it regardless of like what was before. And I had a really great friend. His name's Jim. And we're still friends today. We've been friends for like 35 years. And one of the things he said to me, and I'll never forget it, he's like, always go into the job for the next job that you're looking at it from the lens of the next job or the next promotion that you want, and work at it that way, because then you're always learning. And it was a really good advice. And so at the time, and I don't think we're like that today, but at the time, like, we're always fighting with each other, like for that next big thing. Like competition was not healthy. So I really wanted to help my peers be more competitive in a healthy way. And he really inspired me to do that. So I spent a lot of time like teaching women how we could learn from each other. And then that kind of transpired into, hey, do you think you could come over here and teach us how to do this? And then what about this? And then that's where I discovered like, oh, I'm actually pretty good at this. And those were lessons that I learned from my male counterparts, which at the time I took for granted and I was a little resentful for, because I had to like have them help me to get to the next step. But now with professional maturity, I recognize I was just learning from a colleague and a peer that saw that I had this talent, but we're just so hard on ourselves. And so that's the other reason why I really transitioned into learning, is because I wanted to help people be kinder to themselves, regardless of who they were.
So true. I think something that we all probably struggle with, and it's a journey for each of us. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. The last question I'll ask, and bring this kind of to a conclusion is, you mentioned your book. So I do want to know about your book. What's the one book that you think everybody should take a look at least?
I'm so picky about the things I read and the books that I read, because I've written so many college papers and had to do so much research. And I don't want to do that anymore. Like, I want to enjoy my career. I want to enjoy developing people. And when I read something, I do want to learn from it, but I don't want it to be hard.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons I like leadership books that read like a story, but have a good moral and you can learn something from it. And that's why I love Leadership and Self-Deception, because it's such a good leadership story around, and I don't want to give it away because I want people to read it. It's one of the best I've ever read. But when you meet people, you do make a first impression. And sometimes the first impression is good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's like, whatever. But what that means is I've just put you in a box based on that first impression. And then I never really give you a chance to get out of that box. And so what I love about the book is it helps us to recognize when we may have put somebody in a box. And this is, I think, probably one of the other reasons without knowing it, but when I read the book, it like totally resonated with me. Like, this is why I'm in learning. It's because like we have to help people reframe things. We have to help people understand like everyone has a story. Everyone comes from someplace, and that story could have impacted that day, that person's day, and then they met you. What if they were in a car accident and it's their first day on the job, but they still showed up because they don't want to lose the brand new job they got, you know? What if the dog died? What if something bad happened? Conversely, what if something great happened and they're over the top bubbly for you and you're super conservative, right? Like, we just place people in these buckets that we think of. And the reason that book resonated for me is because it helped me to recognize like we do that all the time. And we should give people more than one chance to get out of the box, because those are some really valuable relationships. And so it teaches you about recognizing when you do that and like how to help you get that person out of the box so that you can form really good working collaborative situations. You may never be a best friend with somebody, but it helps you recognize and respect that person's individuality, which you totally love. And it met all of my criteria. I did not have to write a thesis paper after it. And I still work. Yeah, and they just did an updated version. So I just bought the updated version and I haven't started reading it yet, but I'm super excited to, because I first read it, I think for the first time, in 2016. So this is a book that resonated with me and I've carried it forward wherever I went. I just did a focus group about a month ago and somebody asked the question, what book did you read? What's your favorite book? And so I answer the question with Leadership and Self-Deception every time, and I probably always will. And I guess the only last thing I'll say before I let you wrap me up on this is I want to recognize not everybody learns by reading. which is another lesson I learned from my son. And so that's why I think audiobooks are so important. But there are things that you can do that this is without like torture to read a book. Like there are other things that people could do and you still get the same thing. And there's some great workshops with this very content that are out there that are free that the company does, just so you know.
No, I appreciate that more than you know, actually. I am one of those people that struggles a bit with sitting down and reading and making it through all the books. And that's why for me personally, podcasts have become great. Audiobooks, like you mentioned, so I need it in multiple different formats, depending upon what it is. And I also appreciate the lesson that you shared in that book, because it's something I think, the majority of us do. I know I've done it. And I remember several years ago, somebody said to me, you don't know what somebody has gone through. You don't know their background, their history. You don't even know what happened to them today. And it so struck me. So now when I find myself like even getting a little opinionated about someone, I always stop and say, okay, but you don't know what they're going through. You have no idea. Right. So give a little grace. And try to continue to see, who they are, what they're about. And to your point, working with them collaboratively or on a personal level, right? Giving them another chance. So.
Yeah, no, I love it. And it's really enabled me to have some really good conversations with people, especially when I got off on the wrong foot. That's the other thing. And that's why I mentioned like to start, if you're interested in learning, like start journaling about like what you want. Because one of the things that I found when I was doing that by asking, and I still ask that question today, by the way, and I've been asking myself that question since 2010, which is, have you checked your ego at the door today? And like, I would read it and I'd be like, wow, I really thought I was all that in a bag of chips. And so it was a good learning evolution. And then this book helped me to recognize like where I had done that. So I can actually go back and pinpoint some of the things that I wish, like, I don't ever regret things because you learn from them. And my grandma taught me you can never go backwards, like don't relive the past, but what did you learn from it, kind of a thing. And so that's what I do, especially when people ask me, we're like, what's your advice? And I always say, I can't give you advice. I can share my experience though.
So true.
We're different, right? Well, different. I think that's why I love my conversations with you, is because we share experiences. Like in 4 years, I don't think like you've never said, well, Kimber, try this or whatever. You're always like, we share experiences, and that really resonates. It resonates for a lot of people. So.
Oh, for sure. Or have you thought about, we're like, I've seen this work for others, right? And so it's more about sharing the information and working collaboratively to drive success for both of us. I mean, we've had such a great relationship, and we always want to make sure that each other is successful, to your point about especially helping other women and right things like that. So it is supporting a women-owned business like we are as well, as a passion of mine, but also just individual women and people in general. Please don't take any offense, gentlemen out there, but well, Kimber, thank you so much for coming on our show today. Truly appreciate you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I had so much fun, and it's a good reminder about the why. Like I said, figure out your why. And so my why is always about helping other people and like sharing what we could be even better at. And Sarah, thank you. I really appreciate that. We've done good work together, and I'm so grateful for that.
Yes, we have, and I can't wait to see what we'll do in the future as well.
Right, thank you.
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever shared, but Training Pros, we have a company charity, and it's World Reforestation. So we have planted over 3,500 trees around the world to date. And so just as a little thank you, we're going to plant 5 trees in your name for appearing on our podcast. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we appreciate your time, Kimber.
You're welcome. Thank you, Chenier.
This episode is brought to you by Training Pros, the award-winning contract staffing agency that works exclusively with learning and development professionals to match the right consultants to client projects. If you're in corporate L&D and have more projects than people, let the industry practitioners at Training Pros provide you with the right L&D consultant to start your project with confidence. Find out how we make finding quality consultants easy by scheduling a consultation at www.trainingpros.com.